Welcome to the Daily Horror Habit Podcast. I'm your host, Jay Krieger, bringing you daily reviews of current and classic horror movies for your twisted pleasure. Be aware that these reviews and discussions may include spoilers, and as always, I hope you enjoy. Over the last few months, I've been making an effort to highlight a variety of found footage films, and the main question I approach each of these films with is, did this film's story have to be told within the found footage format? Found footage films such as The Blair Witch Project or Europa Report make the found footage format an intrinsic part of their storytelling. If either film were told in a more traditional filmmaking style, they would be lesser films for it, as they were constructed from the ground up with this particular storytelling methodology in mind. And in this regard, Richard Reforst's 2013 film Frankenstein's Army, which is streaming on Prime Video and Vudu, doesn't quite justify its use of the format, but that doesn't stop the film from being a hellish and fun found footage venture into madness. Set during the dwindling days of World War II, a squad of Russian soldiers are on a mission to investigate the disappearance of their comrades in a small German village. But they quickly discover that a mad Nazi doctor, Victor Frankenstein, played by Carl Roden, has amassed an army of the living dead. But these are no mere run-of-the-mill Nazi zombies, but something far more demented. It seems old Victor has been fusing metal and steampunk mechanics into the flesh of his fallen Nazi comrades, making for all hellish manner of mechanized zombies. And to Reforst's credit, he absolutely succeeds in delivering a Nazi zombie fever dream the likes of which you've never seen before. One particular Nazi zombie has towering metal stilts attached to each limb, a long needle-like drill bit protruding from its face. Another zombie walks upright with a spinning plane propeller mounted where its head should be, as it attempts to slice and dice horrified Russians. Then there are several iterations of zombies with hydraulic clamps, claws, and other means to sever their victims' limbs with. No one Nazi zombie looks alike, which was my biggest worry going into the film. My concern was that there would only be 2 or 3 unique designs amongst a horde of fairly traditional zombies, but this really couldn't be any further from the case with Frankenstein's Army. It isn't just that these industrial undead look terrifically DIY, but it fits the overall madness of Reforst's truly one-of-a-kind take on Frankenstein. There's no logic or reason behind most of his creation's construction, unrestricted representations of what a mad mind creates when it's allowed to run wild. Sure, some of the creations look silly, but the scummy and bleak portrayal of Frankenstein's world that the Soviets become trapped within never allows things to turn overtly slapstick. While the actual setting of Frankenstein's world is mostly a series of gray operating rooms and underground corridors, the CQC approximation of space really allows the film's quality of practical work to shine. Undoubtedly a result of limited budget, but for the purpose of this film, it actually works really well. And when you compare the majority of the film's small-scale encounters to 2 early scenes in the film that attempt to replicate the larger, more traditional World War II shootouts, you realize how smart of a decision the reduction in scale truly was. And now for a brief intermission. If you've been enjoying this episode of Daily Horror Habit, please take a moment to subscribe to the show on your preferred streaming platform or leave us a review on iTunes. And thank you for your continued support, and I hope you enjoy the remainder of today's horrifying episode. The larger scale moments of the film clearly display the limitations of the film's budget. Fortunately, the film's mainly small scale allows what it's going for to work more often than not. Even if you aren't necessarily engaged in between these terrifying bouts of undead butchery. Earlier I brought up whether or not the film's premise needed to utilize the found footage format, and that answer remains no, it really didn't. This is a narrative that could have been told in a traditional manner, and it seems as if they settled on found footage, again, due to limitations of their budget. However, it isn't the most egregious use of the format I've seen. In fact, it's fairly decent throughout, but ultimately, it's unneeded. There are no particular moments that utilize the format in a creative way, or that it justifies being the ideal means for telling this overly simplistic story. There's also a cast of characters who inspire little reason to ever become invested in them, other than serving as fodder for Frankenstein's endless waves of mechanized monstrosities. It's a predictable assortment of war tropes, which I suppose no one should be all that surprised by, but when there are no standout performances other than Carl Roden's particularly unhinged Frankenstein, most of the time I just sat around waiting for these silly Soviets to die a creatively horrible death. That being said, Carl Roden really delivers a perfectly maniacal performance that perfectly embodies the twisted mind of Frankenstein. Listening to this madman attempt to articulate his particular insanity would be hilarious if not for the numerous hulking amalgamations of metal and meat that patrol his underground fortress. I just wish we had more grandstanding monologues about the undead from him, as the cast we spend the most amount of time with are completely forgettable. Now, for a film that began as a 2000 short called Worst Case Scenario, whose premise was zombies rising from the ocean to slaughter tourists on a beach, to what we actually ended up receiving, it is the best case scenario. Frankenstein's Army is a piece of practical effects driven insanity that, while never making the best use of the found footage format, is still a gory fun time that's the most creative spin on this heavily saturated subgenre that I've seen. Just don't expect much substance past the film's blasphemous creations. So if you're in need of a new Nazi zombie film and are a fan of films such as Dead Snow or Trench 11, be sure to check out Frankenstein's Army while it's streaming on Prime Video and Vudu. So that'll do it for another episode of Daily Horror Habit, and I'll see you guys tomorrow for another Daily Horror movie review. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to Daily Horror Habit on your preferred streaming service and follow the show on Instagram at Daily Horror Habit and on Twitter at Daily Horror Pod for episode updates. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.